Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Missing Link in Your Healing, the podcast where we bring you a holistic look at healing at disease, how we get sick, and how we can create the health and vitality that we would love to create. We pride ourselves on bringing a holistic viewpoint, including the physical, mental, emotional, energetic, and spiritual takes on disease and healing, of course. So today we're going to be talking about menopause. I'm on my own today. I'm going to be talking about menopause, and I'm not going to focus too much on the physical aspects. I'm going to talk about some of it that I think is important, but then I'm going to link it for you to the energetic aspects. So, research into female health is notoriously poor. And as a consequence of that, a lot of female health issues are potentially disregarded. And I do think that menopause is one of those areas that is being spoken about more these days, but it is still something that women generally don't talk about unless they've got extremely hectic symptoms. Now, I wanted to just say that some women seem to go through menopause with fewer physical symptoms, and some women go through menopause with more physical symptoms. There's a reason for that. It's not just luck of the draw. Actually, we start preparing for menopause long before menopause happens. So menopause, the definition of menopause is you are officially in menopause as a woman from 1 year after the cessation of your menstruation. So that 1 year after your last menstrual period, you are officially in menopause. And perimenopause, which is that premenopausal period, is essentially anything from 10 to 14 years before that. So it's a long time that we transition into full menopause. And our health in perimenopause, in fact, our health in pre-perimenopause, really has a huge impact on how our menopause is going to actually turn out. Our genetics have a massive impact on how our menopause is going to turn out. And you could be doing all the right things, and you could still actually be having quite a few symptoms. So I thought that, well, you know what? I know all the stuff. I'm going to be absolutely peachy during menopause. And by and large, I have been. I've been very fortunate. But I have been working on my health for a long time. One of the things that I did notice, is that about 6 months after my period stopped, I had the most horrific brain fog. But it took me a while to realize that that's what it was. I thought I just lost my motivation. I thought I didn't have it together. And then I realized, you know what? My brain feels like I'm wading through mud. And I realized, oops, that must be the menopausal brain fog. I also had the sleep disturbances. I had the prone to injuries. I injured my shoulder. I couldn't do the kind of exercise I would have wanted to do for about 4 months. It's a very, very common shoulder problems, injuries to tendons and muscles, and a slower recovery from exercise. I found that I couldn't, if I worked out hard, it took me much longer to recover from the stiffness and the pain. And then I just actually wasn't able to push myself as hard as what I could. For me, the brain fog and the sleep disturbances were the worst. I have had some hot flashes. I still have them. Mine are very, very mild. So anyway, enough about me. What I'm actually just trying to say is that different women have different experiences. This doesn't mean it's your fault. It also doesn't mean that it's your lot. It doesn't mean that it's just something that you have to accept, that this is how it's going to be for you, because there's a lot that we can do in terms of lifestyle, in terms of what's happening to us energetically, that can make a huge difference in how we experience menopause and our health postmenopausally also. So just a few things. Most of us know about the most common symptoms of menopause, like the hot flashes, or flashes in America, flushes in England and South Africa, or the brain fog, as I mentioned, the night sweats, the fatigue, the anxiety and depression, the mood swings, the loss of libido, the increased vaginal dryness. But then there are some less prominent symptoms, such as hair loss, irritability, the insomnia that I mentioned, joint and tendon pain, increased inflammation, dry, itchy skin. What else? Bloating, stress incontinence, digestive disturbances, weight gain, burning mouth, and dizziness. There are a couple of sort of, I forget how many, but there's a lot of symptoms attributed to menopause. Now, I also want to say that not all of that is because of a decrease in estrogen and progesterone, because that's effectively the main thing that happens in menopause. You actually are not producing estrogen and progesterone in the quantities that you were when you were fertile. And that's what causes a lot of the symptoms, but not all. It's definitely more complex than an estrogen or progesterone restriction or deficiency. Which brings me to the topic of hormone replacement and bioidentical hormone replacement. For those of you who don't know, bioidentical hormone replacement is the non sort of pharmaceutical version that where the hormones are absolutely identical to the hormones that you have in the body. The pharmaceutical ones are generally chemically altered somewhat and extracted from other sources. And there's a debate between conventional HRT and bioidentical HRT. There are pros and cons of both. There are also, of course, those people who opt to do no HRT. And so those are the three sort of categories of treatment. If you want to know more about that, two of my colleagues and I did a masterclass. It was 90 minutes long. I'll put the link in the comments or in the show notes, or actually maybe if you email me, I will send it to you. That might actually be better, because then you're insured of actually getting it. It was a free masterclass that we hosted a couple of probably 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago now. And all the information, the comparison between conventional HRT, bioidentical HRT, and not taking anything in terms of HRT, just modifying your lifestyle, the risks, the relative risks of side effects, all of that, it's all discussed in that masterclass by my colleague, Dr. Laura Keller. So I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of that now, but there are three main things that is vital for all women who are in perimenopause or going into menopause. And the first is, if you smoke, you need to stop. Because becomes a huge factor as we move into menopause. The second is we have to severely limit or ideally ditch the alcohol. This is not very popular, but alcohol makes all the symptoms of menopause mostly worse. And the third one is that we have to start exercising, and we have to incorporate resistance training into our exercise regimen, and we have to lift heavy, and we have to do it for 3 to 4 times a week. Now, if you've never done resistance training, you're not going to start by lifting heavy, because it's not going to be impossible for you, and you're potentially going to hurt yourself. So this is not something that you just launch into, please. This is something that you've got to get ideally professional advice for, and you've got to ease yourself into it and work your way up to lifting heavy weights. Lifting heavy weights is important because we want to not just maintain the muscle mass that we have, we want to increase our muscle mass. There is a condition of aging, and if you have listened to our podcast episode on aging powerfully, this will be familiar to you. There's a condition of aging called sarcopenia, which means that naturally we have wasting of our muscles. So the more muscle you have, the more muscle you retain, the more likely you are going to be able to get up and down out of a chair. You're going to be able to bend down. You're going to be able to reach up into cupboards. You're going to be able to carry your groceries. You're going to be functionally fit as you age. When those muscles start decreasing, when we lose muscle mass, that's when we start getting into trouble in terms of our functional ability as we age. So lifting weights, resistance training, very, very important. So those are 3 lifestyle factors that are vital regardless of which treatment option you choose to adopt. Also in that masterclass, I might add, there was a whole section on the herbal replacements that we can take, on herbs that are known to be estrogenic or phytoestrogenic, and what that actually means. As I said, the relative risks of doing HRT, bioidentical HRT, and doing nothing, it really is very, very comprehensive. So if you are interested in that, I would urge you to send me an email, and I will send you the link to that free masterclass. So in menopause, menopause is much more than a decline in estrogen and progesterone, as I said earlier. It is much more complex, and there are many other hormones that are involved. So one of the first ones is insulin. Insulin is a hormone secreted by your pancreas. It's secreted in response to a rise in your blood sugar. So when you eat, the food is converted into glucose. Glucose goes into your bloodstream as your glucose rises. So your pancreas produces insulin. Insulin stimulates the cells of the body to absorb the glucose. The glucose is used by the cell for energy, and what isn't used for energy is stored as fat. So insulin is your fat depositing, fat holding hormone, one of them. And insulin is a pro-inflammatory organ. So when we have high levels of insulin, usually in response to a highly refined carbohydrate diet or high carbohydrate diet, the more insulin we have, the more inflammation we tend to have. And inflammation is the baseline for most chronic diseases as we age. Insulin, as I just said, is the fat depositing, fat holding hormone. And so when we have fluctuations in insulin, we also can have weight gain, particularly the belly weight gain. So if you're shaped like an apple and you tend to gain weight around the belly, you tend to have sort of relatively, your hips and your shoulders are the same size. You tend to have slimmish arms and legs, but you end up having larger breasts or the belly fat. That is very often associated with insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is a precursor to diabetes. So insulin is a vital hormone in menopause because of all these physiological factors that it affects, and weight gain is one of the common symptoms of menopause. So it's pro-inflammatory, as I said. It can cause things like mood swings, food cravings, and weight gain. It also, the implications are that insulin resistance can eventually morph into type 2 diabetes. And we become more prone to insulin resistance as we move into menopause. So insulin resistance is also not something that just suddenly gets switched on by menopause. It gets worsened by menopause. So if you are someone who's had insulin resistance, there's a good chance that that is going to worsen as you move into menopause. And insulin can be regulated through lifestyle factors. Eating a diet that's rich in protein and whole foods, exercising regularly, fasting, intermittent fasting, or longer fasts can really help to regulate insulin and can actually reverse insulin resistance. So lots of lifestyle factors that we can apply that can actually improve our sensitivity to insulin and reduce some of these problems that we can have with insulin. So mood swings is a common symptom of menopause. It's not necessarily associated with estrogen and progesterone, but it can be very much associated with insulin. So you're going to have it because of a drop in estrogen and progesterone. But if you've got insulin resistance, it's going to make it even worse. And if you've got fluctuating blood sugar, the mood swings are going to be real. So again, a lot of the symptoms that we have in menopause are blamed on menopause, but they're symptoms that we had before that are exacerbated during menopause. And then menopause gets the sort of rap for it all. The second hormone that's really important that we need to talk about is cortisol. I've spoken about cortisol before. Cortisol is produced by the adrenal glands. It is produced in response to stress, and it is also produced by the ovaries. Oh, hang on. Sorry. No, it's not produced by the ovaries. That was completely wrong. As your estrogen and progesterone production drops via the ovaries, your adrenal glands are capable of, through various enzymes, making estrogen and progesterone. So you don't stop making estrogen and progesterone completely during menopause. You just don't have the same levels as you have during fertility. But the problem is that when your adrenals are burnt out, and you are producing excessive cortisol, and you're not actually stimulating the pathway that helps you make estrogen and progesterone, then your adrenal gland production of estrogen and progesterone is not a part of the equation. So the little bits that you do require during menopause are now not available to you any longer. So adrenal insufficiency, when you have that during perimenopause, meaning your adrenal glands are burnt out because you're really stressed, so prolonged stress does this, then it makes your cortisol rise or cortisol drop in estrogen more severe. So you can either have excessive cortisol being produced, in which case you have symptoms such as weight gain, anxiety, insomnia, and cravings. Or you can have your adrenal glands are so insufficient, they're not producing enough cortisol because they can't keep up because of chronic stress, for example. And this leads to fatigue, to brain fog, to low mood, and to poor immunity. So it's vital that during perimenopause and menopause, we manage our stress, especially those unconscious stresses, those invisible stresses. In one of our very early episodes, we spoke about those, and we've spoken about them periodically. The unconscious beliefs that we have, right? Our unconscious programming, those are our unconscious stresses. And then we have conscious stresses also, which contribute to this. So it's vital that we get to grips with that we get to grips with certain behaviors like people pleasing that leads to all sorts of stress and can elevate our cortisol. It's essential to stabilize our blood sugar, because when you have fluctuations in blood sugar, it actually also activates fluctuations in cortisol. And it's essential that we have restorative sleep. But now we've discovered that one of the symptoms of menopause is disturbed sleep. So if we just expect ourselves to just carry on doing our lives as we've always done, and we're not prepared to make any kind of changes, such as improving our sleep hygiene, for example, making concerted efforts to relax at the end of the day so that we can sleep better, maybe taking some herbal sleep medication, doing some energetic exercises to help us to sleep more effectively, then any problems that we've had regulating cortisol coming into menopause, and almost all of us have that, are going to be exacerbated. The third hormone that is also important is testosterone. So testosterone has a role in our sex drive. It increases our muscle strength and tone. It has got to do with, it helps us with cognitive sharpness and our motivation. It regulates our mood and affects our emotional resilience. and it affects our bone density and strength. So our ovaries produce 25%. In women, ovaries produce 25% of the testosterone, and the adrenals produce 25%, and the other 50% is actually made in the peripheral tissue through other hormones produced by the adrenals like DHEA. So if your ovaries start decreasing the testosterone production, and in actual fact, there are some studies that have shown that the ovaries don't really decrease the production in testosterone for many women. So effectively in menopause, our testosterone levels can stay almost the same. But if we've got burnout of our adrenals, then 50% of that testosterone that's supposed to have been made via our adrenals is not actually being made. And the 25% that's supposed to be made by the adrenals themselves is also not being made. So 75% of our testosterone is affected actually not by our ovarian function. So in menopause, your ovaries stop producing estrogen and they can stop producing testosterone, and your adrenals then have to take up the slack so that they produce the 25% and produce the hormones that allow the peripheral tissues to make testosterone. So when we don't have enough testosterone, then we lose our muscle tone. We get fatigued. We have decreased motivation, and we have brain fog or lack of mental clarity. Another big symptom of menopause. So in Eastern medicine, they have a completely different concept of menopause than we do in the West. In the West, menopause is considered to be this hormone restrictive kind of issue. It's considered a disease. It gets treated as a medical condition and not as a natural process. In Chinese medicine, they say that menopause is the time of our spiritual and energetic rebirth. It's a gateway to our spiritual power and wisdom. It's a transition period where women grow into their full power. It's known as the second spring. It's the second spring of your life. The first spring of your life is puberty. The second spring is menopause. It's an opportunity to access creativity, for deep self-awareness, and to create freedom for ourselves. Now, that sounds amazing, right? But this doesn't come without a price. It's not just going to happen unless we make space for it. In Jinshin Jitsu, they say that menopause is not a deficiency or a restriction. They say that it's an initiation to release the old and return to our center and access our inner wisdom, our true inner wisdom. It's a gateway to opening our connection to our intuition. It's a true passage to power. During menopause, we shift from creating life for others, physical fertility, and through our reproductive system, to creating life for ourselves, not in a selfish way, but in a way where we connect to our spiritual truth and to our purpose. It helps us to connect to that true spiritual connection to create harmony, not just for ourselves, for everyone that we come into contact with. But in order to do that, we have to direct our energy inward. One of the reasons why they say that we have hot flushes energetically is because our power before has been externalized. We bleed every month. We externalize our energy. In menopause, there's no bleeding. That sacred blood is retained, and that energy is directed inward. And that can be intense, particularly when we don't expect it, particularly when we get told that it's a disease syndrome. When we don't understand the energetic power of menopause, this can be incredibly confining, and it can be really confusing. So this is an opportunity for us to shift our awareness from living from our lower energy centers to connecting to our heart and our upper energy centers. We connect to our heart and our spirit more. It's less about survival and it's more about consciousness and awareness. And it's an opportunity to connect with source energy and our intuition, and to release long-held emotions that have been stored in the body. And this is a problem when we've never had any experience of how to release long-held emotions stored in the bodies, when we don't know how to just feel our feelings, when we don't even know how to sit with a negative emotion, because we're never taught how to do that. So then what happens is, as we get off, we get away with it, usually until we get to menopause, perimenopause into menopause, because then it's a case of now the body is starting to scream, because this is an opportunity for us to truly connect to and to release those hormones. And there are various ways that we can do that. You can do that energetically. You can do it with meditations. You can do it with somatic release exercises. There's so many ways that we can process and allow these emotions to move through us. But this is a portal to make us aware that these stuck emotions are there and they want to be processed. So energetically, there are three main players in menopause. The primary one is the kidney organ function energy. Now, I've spoken about this in other conditions as well, but the kidney organ function energy in Chinese medicine is what they call the source of vital energy, or the Jing. And Jing is closely related to longevity and to hormone balance. And as we go into menopause, the Jing naturally decreases. It allows us to become more settled. It allows us to become quieter. It allows us to involute rather than externalize. But if we need our lives to carry on as they've always been, you can see where your life meets what your body and your spirit is trying to get to. That interface is the place at which these symptoms appear. So the kidney also is in the kidney organ function energy it regulates all our hormone function, particularly the function of the adrenals. And now we're back to the adrenals and the cortisol, right? And the testosterone. So it regulates our creativity as well. And when there's an imbalance in the kidney organ function energy, we get, whether we're in menopause or not, right? We get fatigue, we get fear, we can have low back pain, we can have night sweats, we can have hot flashes, we can have reproductive system issues or urinary tract issues. So cystitis, UTIs, also one of the symptoms that it increases, and stress incontinence increases during menopause, governed and controlled by the kidney organ function energy. And the emotion of the kidney is fear with a capital F. It's about our survival fears. It's about being safe in the world. It's the fears around aging and dying. They become exacerbated. So there are three times in a woman's life where her kidney organ function energy is under pressure. During puberty, because we're getting all those hormones started so that we can become reproductive. During pregnancy, which is when we're gestating a child, obviously, and during menopause. So this doesn't mean that to the rest of the time, the kidney organ function energy is fine. It just means that if there's been a lot of pressure, if you've had a lot of survival pressure, if you've got stress about money, if you're not sure that you're going to age properly, if you're concerned about getting sick, if you're concerned about being alone and having no one to share this with, no one to help you, I don't know, run your life. If you're concerned about loss of function as you age, if you're concerned about becoming ugly as you get older because you think that that's what aging is, all of those fears become exacerbated because the kidney organ function energy is under more stress. So the kidney controls the adrenals produce the cortisol, the adrenals produce those hormones that allow us to make testosterone in our peripheral tissues. The adrenals also help us to make estrogen and progesterone. And when the adrenals are under pressure, none of that can happen effectively. And they, most importantly, connect us to our purpose. The next organ energetically that really influences us during menopause is the liver. Now, they all get influenced, right? But is your liver organ function energy? Because your liver organ function energy governs the free flow of energy, particularly emotional energy. And that liver energy becomes more stagnant during menopause. So environmentally, things like toxins in your food, drug toxins, alcohol. This is one of the reasons why we should actually stop drinking and smoking during menopause, is because life becomes more difficult for your liver from a detoxification point of view. Energetically, the energy of the liver becomes more stagnant. When it's stagnant, common during menopause, the unresolved emotional patterns start surfacing. So the coping mechanisms that we used premenopausally don't work any longer. And that becomes a source of huge frustration for us also. And so it's no surprise that the emotions that are associated with the stagnant liver energy is anger and frustration and guilt. Anger is when we direct it outwards, and and shame is when we direct it inward. We also can have mood swings. We can have PMS-like symptoms. We can have depression when this energy is imbalanced. We can have menstrual cycle irregularities when we're still in perimenopause. We can have headaches, migraines. We can have digestive disturbances like reflux and constipation. When we have healthy liver function energetically, then we are healthy emotional processes. We allow the emotions to flow more freely. We actually process them through the spleen energy, but we're going to talk about that next. So when we don't have a healthy organ function energy in the liver, then things become stagnant. They become more oppressed. That's why it's so common, that mood swings and irritability are really common during menopause. Those are all signs and symptoms that are trying to get our attention. In Jinshin-jyutsu, they say that the liver controls the blood in the body, and the blood transports the light of the spirit to every single organ, every single cell. And the liver is also energetically the place where we house our unconscious limiting beliefs, those core beliefs that we develop of not being good enough, of being invisible, of not belonging, of not fitting in, whatever they are. That is housed in that liver organ function energy. The next organ is the spleen or pancreas, right? And the spleen supports nourishment on all levels. This is emotional nourishment, physical nourishment, food. Are we emotionally nourished? Are we spiritually nourished? Do we feel safe? Do we feel safe in our bodies? Do we feel safe to feel our emotions? Can we express them? But more importantly, can we actually process them and feel them? And the emotion associated with the spleen organ function energy is worry and anxiety. Now, the common symptom of menopause: weight gain, brain fog, fatigue, water retention, low vitality, depression can be associated with the spleen energy. And in between all of this is the heart organ function energy. Now, we did an episode on the heart specifically. And so all the information there applies. The heart is where we radiate. It's where we experience our true joy. It's where we are able to access our creativity so we can express our heart's desires. And energetically, all of these combine with our physical robustness, with what our physical health was like coming into menopause, with how well we process our emotions, with how much we've uncovered the unconscious programs that run us, whether we understand our coping mechanisms. All of that sort of almost coalesces as we move through menopause, which is why this can be such a trying time for women. But it can also be a passage to immense power. Menopause is not a disease, my friends. It's a rite of passage. And as a rite of passage, it's important that we make time for it. Now, I'm not telling you what choices you need to make. One thing I do want to say about taking bioidentical hormones or hormone replacement therapy or conventional hormone replacement therapy is that when you supplement the hormones, you certainly improve the symptoms. No doubt about that. Okay. And for some women, the symptoms are so extreme that that is actually their only option. But you also stifle this passage to power because your body now has enough of this hormone. And so that transition doesn't happen as effectively. Also, if you are taking HRT or bioidentical HRT, know that if you decide to stop it, you are going to be back where you started in menopause. It's not as if you take it for like 10 years and then it's like, well, okay, menopause is over now. I'm past the age of menopause. Because once you take that hormone away, your body's going to be going, where's the estrogen and progesterone? And it's going to exhibit the same symptoms that you had at the beginning. So that's why it's really important that these decisions are not taken lightly, that you evaluate what is it that you want for yourself? What is the experience that you want as you age? What is how much time can you make? How much room can you make for this transition? Some of us feel we have no time and we can make no room for it. Well, that means that you're then going to have to take the bioidentical hormone or the conventional hormone therapy for the rest of your life. Or if you choose not to do that, know that if you don't have time for menopause now and you choose to come off your HRT, you're going to have to make some time for it then. So there's no dodging this. We can't get away from life, my friends. Anyway, I hope that this has given you an insight into some of the energetics around menopause. Again, as I said, my colleagues and I did a full 90-minute masterclass on this topic where we discussed the bioidentical hormones, the conventional hormones, the risks, the herbal supplements, the nutritional support that you can use, as well as the energetics, right? All of that was in one free masterclass. And if you'd like access to that, please just drop me an email. And I will send you the link to a Google folder. You'll get the slides so that you can actually have all that information at your fingertips, as well as the recording of the masterclass. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please, if you found this useful, I'd be so grateful if you could share it with your friends, copy the link and share it with them directly. Please leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube. We value your feedback and your comments. And until next time, keep well.